Where has this movie been all my life? So Deadly Friend tells the story of a computer prodigy who puts a robotic AI chip inside of a dead girl. What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Wes Craven review series, and we are now at 1986's Deadly Friend. For those that might be wondering, if you didn't hear my explanation in previous videos, I'm not going to be covering A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, or any of the Scream films, because I've already reviewed all of those. So if you're curious why I skipped that one, it's already on this channel. I will put it in the Wes Craven reviews playlist, but I won't be revisiting those reviews until I have something new to say about them, of which right now I don't. So now we are at Deadly Friend, and my God, this one's gonna be fun. So after the huge success of 1984's Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven once again was trying to leave the horror genre behind, was trying to kind of broaden his horizons, prove that he wasn't a one-trick pony, do something different, and maybe even in a way try to redeem himself for, well, it certainly wasn't his fault, the failure of Swamp Thing, the other time that he tried to leave the horror genre. John Carpenter had just kind of deviated away from the horror genre and did a sci-fi love story in the name of Starman, which is another movie I've never seen before, sitting on that shelf over there. But after the success of Starman, after all of the rave reviews that John Carpenter had been getting all around from critics and fans alike, while leaving the genre that he is known best for and that his fans want him to stay in, Wes Craven wanted to do something very similar. So there was a script going around that was going to be an adaptation of this novel called Friend, where two young kids, one being a boy, one being a girl, has this little love story going on where the girl tragically dies and the boy puts the brain, the AI chip of his little robot friend into his girl, and it ends very tragically. And so he wanted to adapt that. He wanted to take on the project as director. And throughout the entire production of this movie, that was the intent, was to do this sci-fi love story, a little bit more family friendly, a little bit more wide appeal, and something very different than the bloodshed and the depravity that has been in a lot of the early films that he had done already in his career. So they shot this movie, they tested it for test audiences, which unfortunately for Wes Craven mostly consisted of his fans, and everybody hated it. They wanted more gore, they wanted more horror, they were wondering what the hell this was, where's the nightmare sequences, where's the bloodshed, where's the teens and the tits, where's all the stuff that we came for, Wes? And so unfortunately, after those test audiences, the studio reps and the producers at Warner Brothers mandated that they go back to the drawing board, and Wes and this film's writer redo the film and create 5 or 6 gory death scenes and nightmare scenes to transition what was originally supposed to be this sci-fi love story into a teenage slasher film. The newly redesigned and recut movie was yet again screened for audiences and pretty much got the same exact level of disdain, but for very different reasons. Now there's too much gore. Now the movie feels weird. And unfortunately, the movie came out, it got panned by critics, it's all but been abandoned as far as Wes Craven's considered, and it just comes to be one of those movies that you hear about from people like me. It's got a little bit of a cult following, but for the most part, this is a very underknown, forgotten Wes Craven movie. And I'm here to tell you, this thing is so bad that it is incredible. It is a very subtle art, and it is a very rare achievement for a film to just be such a disaster that it is so entertaining and just joy-inducing to watch the final product. And I am here to say that Deadly Friend for me is 150% one of those movies. This thing on paper is an absolute piece of shit, but I loved every minute of it, and I guarantee you I will be watching this thing again. So starting off with the positives for Deadly Friend, I think that the initial concept, and unfortunately what you can see what the original intent of this film was, is actually very sweet and endearing. You have this robot BB, which is a very 80s robot design, and you have this kid Paul, who is very, you know, off the sides of the social guidelines, you could say. You know, he's somebody who's a science prodigy. He looks like he's in high school, but he's already working with doctors in college and shit like that. So he's somebody that you very easily can understand that BB is kind of like his best friend. That's his creation. That's the only thing on earth that really understands him. And so even just the relationship between Paul and BB is very endearing in this movie. And you see from the beginning that BB is very protective of him and has this little bit of a advancement of his AI to where if he ever feels like Paul's in danger or there's any kind of a threat around, he kind of, doesn't listen to the remote very often. And then you get introduced to the character of Sam, played by Kristy Swanson, who is his neighbor. He just moved into this neighborhood, and she's this very sweet, cute, endearing girl next door. And their friendship starts to bud. And you could just tell from the beginning that it's ill-fated because of this horrible, abusive, drunk father that Kristy Swanson's character has. And so all throughout the first 30-40 minutes of this movie, it's just a really sweet, enjoyable little 80s movie to where it's just bonding. It's just people bonding, it's this robot bonding, and you could almost see very easily where this film was originally heading from that beginning. And even though I would be morbidly curious and I would love to see the actual original cut of this movie with all the original footage back in and see what that original intent was and continue on that path that the first 30 or 40 minutes sets up, I kind of love the ridiculous, out-of-nowhere slasher, fucked-up horror movie that comes out of nowhere about 45 minutes in. And I think part of that experience and why I enjoyed the ridiculous turns is my next positive. It's the fact that I could never tell where the hell this movie was going. And I could easily see somebody saying that's a horrible problem, this thing's so disjointed and so many different weird ideas, which it quite literally was. It was like 20 different producers putting all of their ideas into the basket. But it was never a movie that I could tell where things were going. It felt like it was going to be this love story and maybe it was going to end tragically with this robot, or maybe the robot was going to end up killing the girl, thinking that it was taken away from the friendship. That's what I thought originally. And then all of a sudden the girl dies and he's starting to do this brain surgery with the little chip and you're like, oh my God, he's gonna turn her into the robot. And then from then on, where it goes, where she goes psycho and just starts murdering people in the town, I was like, what the fuck is going on? I have no idea where we're going, but I can't wait to get there. Even to the point where you get to the film's ending and it's so ridiculous. It is so stupid. It is so unfathomably unrealistic for the tone that they are going for with this movie. But I don't think I would have it any other way. It's like when it happens, I'm like, of course. That should be a dream sequence. It absolutely should be a dream sequence. There's even dream sequences earlier on in this film. But because it's not a dream sequence and that is the actual canon ending to this movie, that is fucking hilarious and that is awesome.
Come with me, Paul.
And it's things like that. It makes this movie very hard to review the fact that I actually enjoyed it, because it would be so easy to just come in and tell you everything that's wrong with this movie, and there is a lot, but this really is going to be one of those love it or hate it movies. You're either going to watch this and go, oh my God, no wonder I've never heard of this thing before. Back to the trash you go. Or you're going to be like me and go, why did I not watch this my entire life? Because this thing is just an absolute glorious train wreck that makes me smile ear to ear at how ridiculous this thing is. And I actually think the journey of the main character, Paul, is actually pretty interesting for this movie, even within this mangled-ass studio cut, to where you can tell he's very much a good-hearted person. You can tell that he very much cares for Sam, and he's just devastated whenever he finds out that she's dead. And even from the macabre side of things and how gruesome it is, him kidnapping her body and trying to do this open brain surgery on her to save her life is so grotesque, but it's so like heartwarming at the same time. It's like, man, that is true love right there, going through all of that. And all throughout the second half of the movie where things are just going horribly wrong and he just refuses to see it because he just hopes so much that he can save this girl's life all the way to the very end of the movie. It's just an interesting journey to go on. At no point, regardless how stupid this idea is, and regardless how much it goes off the rails, at no point did I lose any sympathy for the main character, because even after all the carnage, I'm like, maybe he could still save her. Maybe there's a chance. And finally, even though this side of the film is kind of what was the nail in the coffin for this film's legacy and for this film's reception and for what Wes Craven sought out to do, I think that the kills in this movie, one in particular, are actually pretty awesome. Like they're very generic in spots. You know, there's a guy that literally just gets thrown with some wire work at the end of the film into a police car.
She must have thrown him 30 feet.
There's a guy that gets put up against a big-ass furnace, like a big boiler, and he's melted pretty much halfway alive, which looks pretty gruesome. But the kill to Mama Fratelli with that basketball, and we have all seen this GIF. If you're in the horror community, if you have any kind of a social media involvement in the horror community, you have seen the GIF of this movie before, where her head just gets exploded with this basketball, and I never knew what movie that came from until it got to that scene and she was screaming, and I was like, oh my God, this is it! I don't care how terrible this movie is. I don't care even if you hate it. That is one of the greatest 80s kills of all time. Moving on to the mixed, the movie has a very weird score. There's points where the score is very good and it makes sense for the tone of the film as it starts out, where it's kind of a sci-fi love story. That side of things makes sense. When it gets into the more horror stuff, the score changes a little bit and it doesn't quite fit all the way, but that also kind of becomes a good old-fashioned Bob Ross happy accident, to where it's so off-kilter that it kind of just adds to the disaster of what's going on. So I feel like there could have been something a little bit more iconic with this movie, even with the train wreck that it is, especially when you have something like Nightmare on Elm Street that was just a couple of years before and has one of the most iconic horror movie scores of all time. Scores are very important to horror. Scores are very iconic with horror, and I feel like Deadly Friend, there was hope there to where aspects of this score could have been very memorable, even despite this film's tragic outlook. But it was something that I liked. It was something that by the end of it, I still found it kind of memorable. And the other mixed aspect for me is the robotic mannerisms that they give Kristy Swanson's character, to where like BB as a robot only had 3 fingers, so she's walking around like, you know, Spock the whole time, and she's walking around like this. And there's even a scene at the end where she's running towards a cop where she like holds her hand out, and I'm like, what is she doing? Is she like trying to do finger guns? And then she starts like running towards him with the Spock fingers, and I was like, oh man. And again, it just adds to how ridiculous it is. But there was something about that direction, and even the way that like her head movements and everything are, like her eyes move first and then the head moves. And I thought that all of that was very accurate, trying to recreate how this 80s robot moved and how he probably would move if he suddenly was inside of a human body. There was part of that I got. There was another part of it that was just straight up goofy. It was just straight up weird. And there was a way that I think that I would have liked it more if that aspect of it was just at first, where I can't stop doing this.
I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
If she had started doing this whenever she was just kind of gaining her motor functions back, and then slowly started to realize, oh, I have other shit that I can use. And now moving on to the negatives, and guys, like I've said, I could pick this movie apart if I really wanted to. On paper, there is so many things wrong with this, and I agree with everything you're gonna tell me about. Well, what about this? How about this? You liked this? But even kind of sifting through that so terrible that it's good stench that this movie has, there is one aspect to it that by the end I did feel very disappointed that we didn't actually get a full conclusion to, and that's the love story. You know, after about halfway through this movie, the whole love drive of Paul to reincarnate this girl and to try to keep her going with this little robot chip, it's kind of lost. You know, it's all given away for the horror slasher aspects. And by the end of the film, like, you know why he's still going. You know why he's still trying to save her. You know why at the very end he goes to the morgue, try to pull her body out one more time. But there was just something missing from that sweetness that we got in the first 30, 40 minutes of this movie, to where when it ended, I was like, that's horrible. And I loved how horrible that was. That was so ridiculous, but I really wanted more. I wanted it to feel like Sam and Paul really loved each other. Like when she's dying and she finally says a word, she just says, Paul. Like that was a moment where I'm like, oh, it's starting to get back up now. We're starting to get the romance back. We need this. We need this to be kind of the denouement of the movie. We need this to come back in the climax. And that's the one little sparkle of it that we get for the entire last half of the film, was that one little scene there. It just kind of left me a little bit cold. It kind of left me a little cold. You know, it's a shame that studio heads and people that don't make movies think that they know how to make movies, because I'm really morbidly curious of what the genuine, straightforward sci-fi love story of this movie could have been. And I hope maybe one day we get to see it, although since Shout Factory couldn't get the footage, I think it's very unlikely. But that was the one aspect, even the disastrous studio cut, that I'm going to continue to just gush about how horrible it is. I really wish I could have got more out of the romance side of things for the climax of the movie. It just felt like it was forgotten. But overall, guys, this is going to be a movie that we're all going to argue about and debate about downstairs. I think that there's going to be a lot of people probably in my camp to where it's so bad that it's good, and they probably couldn't wait for me to talk about it just because of that. There's going to be a lot of you that have seen this or might see it after this review and say, what the fuck were you watching? This was garbage. And there might even be a few of us down there that genuinely think this is a great movie. I have no idea what everybody's talking about, but this was a great experience. Maybe it's because I've gone through all of the grindhouse exploitation era of Wes Craven. I've seen all the sexual assault and the murder and the decapitations and the cannibalisms and all of that. Now just something absolutely stupid like this was just nice, a breath of fresh air for me. But whatever it is, the weird mix of ingredients that we have in Deadly Friend turned out to be a movie that is god-awful, but God, I love it. So if you're a fan of the serious films from Wes Craven, this is not going to be for you whatsoever. But if you're somebody that can kick back and enjoy a really, really bad movie, this is one of the better, so bad that it's good experiences that I have ever had. So check this thing out online and stream it. So what do you guys think of Deadly Friend? Do you love this movie? Do you hate it? Is it so bad that it's good and you can't put a finger on why you enjoy it? Let me know down below, guys, and let's talk about Deadly Friend. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this Wes Craven review series. And we also have the 2007 Hills Have Eyes Part 2 coming up very soon. And of course, Texas Chainsaw drops this week as well. So I've got 2 or 3 videos planned for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. So if you're enjoying anything that I have done in this video and you want to see any of that I just talked about, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of it. Thank you once again for watching, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.